Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the July 2020 TAF meeting. Good to see everybody here this evening. We have a terrific guest today. Beth Shugg is the editor of Midtown and Cary Living magazines. We invited her to join us this evening to talk about the magazine a little bit, her editorial needs and what TAF can do toward that end. And so I asked Liz Brignac, who is a regular contributor to Midtown, to have a little chat with Beth. So Liz, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I'm going to introduce Beth. She is a terrific editor. I've worked with her. I worked with her in Carolina Parent, and I've worked with her at Midtown. And so she joins us from Midtown Magazine and Cary Living, where she became editor in January. Was that right, Beth?
That's correct.
And before that, she served as editor of Carolina Parent Magazine and We'reTraveler.com for The Triangle. And those are both Morris Media publications. And that was for 6 years. And before that, when she was raising when her kids were younger, she was the editor for Wakefield Plantation Magazine and for Wake Living and 15501 magazines. And she built a social networking site for The Triangle called Triangle Tracks while she had young kids, which I thought was really cool. I actually looked at it, looked it up. Is it still running?
No, I think I sold it to somebody in Charlotte. I think they let it go. I just don't think they ever kept it, but you could probably look on the Wayback Machine and find it somehow, you know, I don't know. It was a fun thing to do for a few years. I did it for 3 years.
That's how I actually got started with Carolina Parent. You're thinking about parenting stuff a lot and you want to use your writing and editing. Beth is married and has 2 sons in their 20s and an 18-year-old daughter, and 2 of them are going to Virginia Tech, apparently, which I did not know until this conversation. So,
yeah.
So thank you so much for coming. It's going to be very exciting, I think, for everyone to get a chance to meet you, or meet your head. And
Thanks.
I wanted to ask I was looking at the history you sent, and Midtown, Cary Living, Carolina Parent, We're Traveler for the Triangle, all of your writing has mostly been very locally focused.
Yeah.
So I was interested, like, how would you recommend that people find good local stories?
That's a great question. First of all, let me just say, if you hear puppy barking in the background, it's because we have 2 Brittany Spaniels in our house, and they're very loud this time of the evening. This is their active time, so sorry about that. My son, who lives in Charlotte, has 1, and he's been living here this summer just because he could, because he works for Lowe's corporate, and they had them work from home. So we got the puppies, decided to raise them together for a few months, and he's leaving Saturday, so it's going to be an interesting weekend, but they're barking very loudly, so I apologize for that. Okay, so local stories. You know, I always tell everybody that I kind of have an equal opportunity approach to stories. I will take them from anybody, anywhere, as long as I feel like they have something unique to offer about what makes living in this area different or special or unique from other areas. And so it's really just a matter of however you happen to come up with some stories would be based on your own experiences in the area, the places you go, the people you know. We're always looking for interesting people. It doesn't have to be famous people. It could be just somebody who has a very interesting outlook on life, or does good things for other people, and goes out of their way to do kind things for different organizations, or is just has become a local celebrity because they've worked hard all their lives and you know, spent many years training or practicing for whatever they do. So we're always looking for really interesting people and really unique angles to living in the Triangle, because you have people here from everywhere, and so they're bringing unique experiences from all over the country or world. And, you know, it's always nice to have the local native information, but we're kind of not really a city of locals anymore. We have so much more to offer the people who read our magazines, because the people who are living here are those readers, and they may be from China, or they may be from New York, or they may be from Florida or California. And so I like to keep our native locals perspectives in there as well, but we can't just focus on them anymore. So local stories are really just the people who live here and how they interact with this area that they live in, and what what makes it home for them and why they like it, and maybe why they don't like it and what they'd like to see changed. It's kind of a general answer, but the heart of it is that I really like somebody who comes to me with a very specific angle about a person or a place or an experience or an event in this area that nobody may know about, or may have gone to a million times, a festival they may have gone to a million times, but didn't know something unique about it that happens every year. So that's really what I'm looking for, because there's a lot of competition in this market, and we can write about the general stuff, but everybody else is already doing that. So I'm looking for something really unique, and sometimes we do have general stories, and those are very easy to plan. They don't really take a lot of work, because you're just basically, like, for example, our next issue is going to have a city guide and a town guide. So Midtown will have a city guide, and Western Wake and Cary Living, it'll be a town guide. And that's going to just consist of information about the neighborhoods and the towns within those areas. And some of it's going to be colloquial, generalized information, and some of it's not going to be. But something more unique that takes a lot of thought, that we really like those stories the best, because that's what's going to make somebody pick it up if they see something like that on the cover and the table of contents. Does that answer your question?
It does. It sounds like what you're saying is that you want it to be kept local, personal, interesting, unique. So
and not necessarily native North Carolina. It's our readers are just not all native North Carolinians anymore. But one of the reasons they came down here or up here or over here was because they like it here. So we do need to honor those stories as well, because that's why people came here in the first place, so.
And it's such a great strength of this area.
It really is. It makes it
so many people from so many different places.
Yeah, definitely.
So you started at Midtown and Cary Living in January. What changes have you been making, or where are you looking to go with it?
So when I arrived, they were in the process of finding not only a new editor who they wanted to be a publisher, and I said, no, thank you. I do not want to be a publisher. I only want to be an editor. And I kind of inherited some of the publishing stuff, but it's okay. They were also looking for a new creative director, and so we now have a new creative director. So they kind of wanted to do a complete overhaul of what they had been putting out. And what they had been putting out was good, and it was high quality and very sophisticated. But my first impression of the magazine when I looked at it was just a lot of content. And we had a lot of sections, and it wasn't organized, or it wasn't flowing in a way that I felt like it should be. So what we've done is we've reorganized it and added a front section, moved some stuff that was in the back to the front, cut down on the number of departments and increased the number of feature stories, and basically tried to keep some of the department subjects the same, but change up the themes of them a little bit, if that makes sense. So the candid conversation, for example, we don't always want to have a book author. We don't always want to have a sports, a professional athlete, or we're looking for a little bit more variety in those areas. So those are some of the big changes editorially that I made. The creative director is changing the way it looks, and you'll start to see a little bit of that with each issue. She's not going to change it all at one time, but she's sort of doing a little bit here and there, and it's already making a difference. I think we've already gotten some nice comments about it. Our latest cover, which I don't know if you've seen, but it's very simple. But this was my neighbor's pool, and we just needed a pool, and so we hired a bartender and a photographer, and they built a little scene area there, and then here's Cary Living. And so we made these delicious drinks, and it was very sophisticated but simple. And so she's kind of taking that approach, I think. The next issue will be fall fashion, so there'll be some sort of fashion cover. And it's very hard to do a fashion layout right now, because there's really nobody can go anywhere. So you're going to get dressed up to do what? You make a Zoom call, I actually changed out of my t-shirt and Nike shorts for this meeting. So we decided to change the theme for fashion to be, and I'm just giving you guys a little sneak preview of that, but it's going to be, it's going to call it Socially Distant Game On. And it's basically going to be people who are playing board games in their houses with each other. socially distant and with, drinks and food that are safely proportioned and separated from each other. We're not really going to show the food or the drinks, but we're just showing like how you would dress to go to something like that, because nobody can go anywhere right now, but you still want to have some form of socialization, and you still want to be able to enjoy some fashion. And maybe that's really all you can do is go online and order stuff right now. So order a nice pair of jeans or some kind of fall piece that you'll be able to use for years and years once this is all over. So we're just, it's this whole thing. And I know that's probably a question for later that you might be getting to, Liz, but the past few months since March, we've had to completely reinvent and do a 180 on our content because of it, and just make total big changes for how we were going to approach the themes that were planned back in for way before I got there, like October of 2019. We've had to change a lot of that up. So that's kind of what's been going on with that. But those are the changes. Just basically, I'm just trying to stay above water right now and adjust to all of these changes we're all having to make. And it really does affect the content. What you normally would be doing right now is completely different from what we're having to change to. So it's been a challenge, but it's been fun. And I have been working from home, which makes it a lot easier. I'm not going to lie. I like that a lot. So
I noticed that your online presence has changed.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. So we didn't have a newsletter. We didn't have a blog. We just were putting our stories on the website every 2 months when they would come out. That was it. And so I said to Ronnie, our publisher, you guys could be making money on digital ads, and you could be sending out emails. And we do have a great social media specialist, Brittany Murdoch. She's young and she's hip and she's dedicated to what she does, and she's doing a great job with that. So I felt really good about how our social media presence was, except that the previous publisher had decided to get rid of Twitter. So we added that back in just because it's there and we can use it and it's free. But we didn't have a newsletter and we didn't have a blog, something that we could update every day or every week. So we now have that. It's called Talk of the Triangle, and it covers both Midtown and Cary Living. We do have separate blogs on the websites, and we started out with separate newsletters, but we've now changed it to be one newsletter that goes out to everybody in Raleigh and Western Wake. So we'll see how that goes. We're still kind of playing around with it to see what works best, but we definitely needed a digital presence. And that was something I was accustomed to doing at Carolina Parent. So it was pretty easy for me to kind of like try a few things that I was used to doing already. So and we're using MailChimp. I was already accustomed to that. I did have to learn Foursquare. It's not that hard to use. So I've learned how to use Foursquare. So I mean, it's nice to pick up new skills too along the way. So, but we'd like to do more. I mean, we would like to have ads on our website. It's just really hard right now to sell any ads. So we're trying to do the best we can there, but we're still coming out with issues. I know some magazines decided to go digital. I think Walter went digital for one issue. They're back on the stands now, but we just said, nope, we are not going to just go digital. We have to put something out. So we stuck to it, and we did. And we're still hoping to continue to do that.
I was actually going to ask about the COVID related material later, but since we've started talking about it, do you think that some of the changes you've made in response to the COVID virus are things you're going to keep?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, part of it was just simplifying the flow, just trying to focus on what we felt like people really wanted. People really want to know about the restaurants, even though most of them can't, you can't go in there and sit down. You can still go get takeout or sit outside. But we wanted to keep that section really, thorough and continue that. There are some sections, for example, the feature story that we were going to do in May, June was going to be this beautiful fashion feature at a pool with resort wear was going to be the theme. And so we were planning that in March, and then all of a sudden COVID-19 happened. And I said, there is just no way we can do this fancy, sophisticated resort wear themed story now. Nobody's going to be able to go on vacation. Because people aren't going to be wanting to spend their money on stuff like this. So we dropped that completely. And also we couldn't get models. At one point they were available, and then the modeling agencies were like, sorry, we can't let you use any of our models right now because it's not safe and it's not healthy. So we were kind of forced to anyway. And so we just did a 180 change and decided to do a big feature on how the community was helping, deal with this, and the different frontline workers and everybody who was coming together to help out. And we did one big story on that, which you helped us with too, Liz. You helped with that issue quite a bit. And
that was the funnest article to write. It
yeah,
gave me hope in humanity.
yeah, I know. Yeah, you did the food themed one that's in the current issue. How the food industry sort of came together and the different organizations that feed the hungry, and it's just been really inspiring. I mean, it really does make you appreciate those little blessings that you have in your life when you see what some of these people are going through and how others have responded. So it's not necessarily what our readers always want to read about. I mean, we have a lot of high income readers, but a lot of them are the ones who are helping out right now. And they realize, like, this is something I need to do, that I can do, that I want to do. And so, we're going to keep serving that theme because it's going to go on for a while. I mean, who knows how long, but we're going to keep doing something related to that because it's the biggest issue of my life. I don't know about you guys, but this is huge, and I have a daughter who is a senior in high school this year, and to see what they all went through and the things that they're missing out on. Well, now I'm like, hey, Katie, guess what? You're not class of 2021. You're actually in a pretty good situation because these guys might not even go to school this year. She was a volleyball player. She got to have her senior season. She made all conference. It was great. She got to do a lot of things that these girls who are seniors now aren't going to get to do. So, there are those opportunities where you realize that, yeah, it's bad, but it's not as bad as it could be. And you just kind of have to look for those little glimmers of hope and the good things that happen. So that's what we try to do with the stories too. We just try to look for the positives that are out there and how people are coming together and helping others. It's very inspiring, and everybody really appreciates reading that kind of stuff, and I think needs to read that kind of stuff to really understand how much work this is all taking and what people are giving up to do the right thing and to handle it the right way. So
You had mentioned that that a lot of the readers are high income, and that's actually a question we got on the chat. Who is the target reader for the magazine, and is there an economic?
yeah, I mean, I'll tell you basically what I know is that when we're looking at demographics, we tend to look at, I would say 250 and above that income, but we know that there are people that are lower than that, and we want to serve them too. It's just that, how publications run, they're advertiser driven, and our advertisers are seeking customers from that clientele. And so we do try to serve their interests with our content, but we also know that, and that's why our departments are very good for filling other niches that we need to fill. I mean, I like to write for everybody, but I do understand that we're running a business here, and I do like to have that wall up between advertising and editorial, but I have to keep in mind who's picking us up, who's advertising in our magazine. So it's just a delicate balance that every editor has to keep in mind as we're planning content.
So this is going to get us back to COVID in a minute because it's related to pitches, but right, overall, what are you looking for from a person who's pitching Midtown? You'd already sort of talked about local stories and a hook and a locally interesting, unique approach, but also just basics about the pitches themselves, like how long they should be, what kind of information do you want in them, et cetera.
Right. Well, I mean, the best thing is a subject line that gets my attention because I get a lot of emails during the day. I'm just looking through my contents now to sort of get an idea. Like some of the things that we do every issue that we're always, every time looking for stories to fulfill are the chef's table. So if you've been to a really good restaurant, it doesn't have to be too fancy, or it can be really fancy. We're looking for all kinds of restaurants for that. And community stories, we just did Howling Cow, the ice cream that they make there, and the dairy farm over there at NC State. Education, that's something that's going to be huge this year with virtual, everybody going virtual. We're going to be looking for stories for that. Local talent is good because it can be anybody. The one that we just did for Cary Living was a jewelry designer, so but it could be anybody who's talented in any area, and there's plenty of room for a unique angle there. Living well is just healthy living. So that's another thing that people are really focused on right now, because we're at home and we can do it more easily than when we're on the go and we're rushing out the door from 9 to 5 every day. And then travel. I know travel is not something that we're encouraged to do right now, but there are so many great places in North Carolina where you can take a day trip. And you know, there are the places that everybody's heard about, like Asheville and Biltmore and the beaches, but there's always something unique about those areas that we don't know about. So I'm always really interested in that sort of an angle of smaller towns. You know, there are some really great small towns, like Cheerwine, I think was invented in, is it Winston-Salem? Or no, it's not Winston-Salem, it's a smaller town, and I can't think of what it is right now, but there's always something unique out there that we can use for our travel section. So those are some of the departments that we kind of stick with every issue. The features are going to usually evolve around our themes, and the themes don't change that much from year to year, although this year may be different. We did just have a meeting, and we kind of left some room for changing our themes for 2021, but we did mostly decide to keep most of them the same. So for January, we do our Diamond Awards, and that's where we call out the best of Raleigh and Western Wake, and we have voting, and there's going to be a form, an online form that people vote on. So we'll have some stories surrounding that. We also have our Home and Garden issue in March and April, which I think is going to be a really good one this year because so many people are spending so much time at home. There's some beautiful gardens out there now that people have been tending to since March. And that they'll, you know, I know a lot of people are going to continue to work from home. So they're going to be continuing to spend a lot of time in their home. So we're looking for stories that will help us with ideas for that. The pandemic is going to continue to be a theme, as I've said. Anything unusual or important about that we would be interested in. Outdoor living has become huge because you can't go anywhere else. So you go to your backyard or you go to a park. And so you want your outdoor environment to be nice. So we're going to be looking for stories about that. Food is always going to be a necessity. We have a food issue that's usually May, June, and that can go in a variety of different directions. This coming issue that we're working on now, September, October, is a newcomers issue. And we kind of changed a little bit to be the city guide and the town guide, the one I was just telling you all about. We'll probably do something similar again next year. And then, of course, we have the holiday issue for November, December. And this year, you know, who knows if people are even going to be able to visit their relatives for the holidays. So it's going to be a unique issue in that sense. We're going to have to write about spending the holidays, you know, in a socially distant way. And how do you do that? And how do you have a big Christmas dinner with grandparents if they, you know, if they do decide to come over? What do you do? And how do you make that safe? So stories like that. That's kind of what we're looking for, but those are the general themes. Anything unique, I will find a way to fit it into an issue somewhere, because if it's unique enough, it needs to be, it's a story that needs to be told. So I really, really love the stuff that nobody else has written about. And I don't really, and it's something kind of unusual about me. I don't really look at our competition that much. I don't want to make editorial decisions based on what they're doing. You know, I want to make editorial decisions based on what our readers are telling us they like, what they're telling us they don't like, what our advertisers are concerned about. You know, I have to keep that in mind. And then what they do want us to write about, as long as we're not putting all of our advertisers in the stories all the time, because we don't do that. If it makes sense, we do, but if it doesn't, we don't. So that's kind of how I roll. I really don't even read Walter that often. Hate to say that, but like, that's our biggest competition. I just don't really care. I mean, they're a good magazine, but they're doing something different than what we do. They just kind of take a different approach to Raleigh than what we do. And that's why we're different. That's what makes us Midtown. And, you know, Cary Living and Cary Magazine are big competitors as well. I don't really look at Cary Magazine. I'm sorry. If any of you have written for it, I apologize, but I just kind of like to take a fresh look at what we're doing and not base my decisions on what everybody else is doing. So, and I was like that at Carolina Parent too. It was a little bit easier there because we were the only parenting publication in town. So we didn't really have a lot of competition, but it didn't keep us in business because, as you all know, Morris Media decided to stop publishing, and they do have the website still running, but you know, they're no more. So that's a niche that probably could really easily be filled in this area if anybody decided to fill it. So, but yeah, is that sort of what you're looking for there?
But could you also just tell me a little bit about, all right, so an interesting subject line, and then, you know, pitches can be anything from like long 5-paragraph,
Right.
you know, or would you want something quicker, or what kind of pitch specific, like format are you looking for?
Okay. Yeah. So I would say something in the subject line, get right to the point in the first couple of sentences. Give me some bulleted details about what, you know, the structure that you're looking for. Like, here's how I see this story forming and what I think needs to be covered. And then, you know, how is it going to relate to the theme? And I do like for the writers to kind of have an idea of what our theme is, because, you know, if possible, it's nice to kind of reflect our theme in some way. But if, like I said, if it's unique enough, then I'll definitely find a way to use it in one issue coming up, if not that issue. So I don't like really long queries. I just don't have time. I get so many emails every day. I have to go through them really quickly. And I do have a very organized way of storing emails. So I have, you know, each issue is a folder, and I'll move it into whatever issue I think it would work for after I reply to the writer. Because as soon as I get a story idea, I don't usually come back to it a day or two later. I usually answer pretty quickly if I'm not busy. And I will say, you know, I just looked at my editorial budget and I think this will be good for this issue. And I'll go ahead and make a note. And that's what I do. I have a spreadsheet. I make a note of it right then and there. I put the writer who sent it to me so that I don't give it to somebody else, which would be horrible if that writer came up with the idea. And then I stick it in that folder. And so that way I've always got something waiting for when we go to plan the next issue. And I will typically plan it 4 months ahead of time and make story assignments 3 months ahead of time, so that the writer gets about 1 month to write it and I get it back from them 2 months before it appears in print. And that gives me a month to get it edited and ready for the designer to lay it out. And also it gives me a cushion of space so that if something needs to be rewritten or if we need more information, I can go back to the writer and give them another week to do that. So I have to really plan far ahead. So if you're looking at our editorial calendar, and I can send that out to you anytime anybody asks me, I always send it to a writer. And you're looking ahead, the further ahead you can give me a story idea, the better chance that we'll be able to make that assignment, because I can plan 3-4 months out at a minimum to get that story ready to go.
And will we find your themes, the planned themes on the editorial?
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I think they put them on the media kit, and
okay.
I don't think that they have been doing a very good job of publicizing that on the website. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to do that. But I do have a media kit that I can email to you, and it's in there.
Great.
Yeah, so just email me. If you don't see it on our website still needs a lot of work, then just email me and I'll send it to you. It's a PDF. And it basically is the themes I just told you, but we're getting ready to make next year's media kit, and I can send you this year's for now, but I could go ahead and give you an idea of what's coming up for next year, because it's not going to be that different. Those themes tend to work well with this issue. And so, you know, when you're a new editor, you don't want to come in and start making a ton of changes, and this is what's been working. So I was fine with it. I think they're good themes. So
how far ahead would you like to receive pitches?
I would say 6 months ahead of the issue that you'd like it to appear in, because that way, if I get it and I am really busy and I don't get to it for a couple of weeks, which is very rare, I usually respond sooner than that, but that gives me some time, a little cushion of time to figure out the best issue for it, even if it's the very next issue that we're working on. So
is there anything you would not want to see, like a red flag or something that you would see?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. We don't really do a lot of politically motivated stories, because you're going to piss somebody off somewhere. You just are. I mean, there's just, you just don't know what people are going to agree with, and I like getting passionate emails from people, but I don't like angering people. I'm not a political magazine. We're a lifestyle magazine, and we represent readers who have views all over the board, and I have views all over the board. So I don't really want a politically motivated story. A human interest, treating others kind story is fine. just don't make it a political situation, because human kindness shouldn't be political. So I just don't want something that, because when you think about journalists, you're going to assume they're going to be looking at one way or another. And I just don't want anybody to make any assumptions about me like that, because you would be surprised. I have views all over the board in both political parties. And so I don't really like assumptions. I don't like proposals that assume I'm going to agree one way or the other, because I might not. It doesn't matter if I do or not. If I think it's something our readers, will value, and we can present it in a non-political way, I will do that. But I just don't want political pitches, because that's just not the kind of magazine that we are. So that's probably a red flag.
Okay. How long, you said you respond to pitches relatively quickly?
I try to respond within a few days. If I can't, I will at least email you and say, hey, I'm slammed this week. We're at deadline. I will get back to you after this deadline ends. We send the magazine to the printer this day, so look for a response the following week. So I will try my best. If I don't, please do bug me again, because it actually helps if I'm really super busy to get a reminder, especially if it's a story idea that I think would be really great for our readers, So yeah, don't feel bad about bugging me. It's just some weeks are really tough for me to get to all the emails.
And we have a question. Can your writers on the chat, can your writers write for other local magazines as well as yours? Like if you're a Walter writer, can you write for Midtown and et cetera?
Yeah, so I have to tell you what my publisher says about that, because I don't really mind, but he does. And I tell him, he's a great guy, but I'm like, these people are freelance writers. Like, we can't tell them who they can and can't write for. He's like, well, yeah, but we can just not have them write for us again. And so I told him, I was like, well, yeah, but if they're a really good writer and they're doing a great job for us, I'm not going to rule them out. So if you do write for Walter or Cary Magazine, those are probably our biggest competitors. Well, and Raleigh Magazine, as you know, is also a competitor, and his former daughter-in-law is the publisher of that. So he's got a lot of connections. And I just kind of don't tell him everything sometimes, so he doesn't look into who's writing for us. But I just value good writing, and you all have to make a living too. And so I'm not going to tell you who you can and can't write for. If it's really obvious and he finds out about it, he may say, well, you can't use that writer anymore. So I'm trying to avoid that. But sometimes he's very opinionated. So he'll let me know that that's how he feels, unfortunately. But I understand, because I was a freelance writer for many years while I was raising my kids. And sometimes you have to take every story assignment you can get. And I respect that. And I wouldn't want to tell somebody not to do that,
Speaking of making a living, can you talk about how much you pay per article, whether you pay for reprints, that kind of thing?
Right. So we have, for our veteran writers who have been there for a while, we tend to pay a little bit more per word, but the average that we pay is 30 cents a word for if it's in one magazine. If it's going to be in both, it'll be a little bit higher. It depends on how long they have been writing for us. Anywhere from 35 to 45 cents a word in that case. And that's a policy that was put in place when I came in as part of the changes they wanted to make. It was not a policy that I came up with. It was just, here's what we're going to start doing. And so if it's a new writer, it's going to be 30 to 35 cents a word. But I also have had requests from writers, hey, can you bump this up a little bit, because this is a lot of work and this is taking more time than I thought it would. And I always honor that whenever I can. Right now it's a very tough time to be a magazine publisher, so I'm also trying to be respectful of his budget and keep within that. So I really think freelance writing should be paid more than it is, but I have to abide by the budget that he gives me and try to make the most out of it that I can.
So if you're reprinting, like if you're using an article in both Cary and Midtown,
right,
you would pay more per word rather than
Yes.
paying a separate
Well,
month fee
it
for each one?
depends. So like in this last issue, we had, Western Wake's Coolest Cocktails and Raleigh's Coolest Cocktails. So we had completely different stories. So we ended up paying for 2 stories. So it was 30 cents a word because it was just completely different content. If it's a story that can be used in both magazines, like the Howling Cow one was used in both magazines, then that's a case of where we would pay a little bit more per word because they're not having to write 2 articles, but we are using it in 2 publications. So, we try to honor that by paying a little bit more. A reprint that's already been, I have not been in a situation yet with Midtown and Cary Living where we've run a reprint yet. And I don't know what they did in the past, so I don't have an answer for you on that one yet. But I know that they don't like for us to use something that's been used elsewhere if possible. I mean, one of the big things that, and I'm a big supporter of original content. I really like for our content to be written only for Midtown and Cary Living, unless it's something that's so great that I don't mind reprinting it, and it has been at least 6 months to a year, and it might have been reprinted from a magazine across the country or something that just happens to relate to our area. But most of the time we're going to be doing really localized content. So if it's a reprint, it was probably going to be in some other magazine from around here, and I probably would have heard of it, So that's not my house, by the way. The puppies quieted down.
So can you describe Midtown's agreement with freelancers regarding article rights? How long you have rights, but what their rights are, et cetera?
Yeah, so we just purchased first time rights. And for 6 months, actually it's 1 year exclusivity now. Ronnie asked me to bump that up. So we purchased first time rights, and then you retain the original copyright and you can sell it to someone else after a year to somebody else in our area. Now, if it's like across the country, I don't think we're going to know about it. So you could probably get away with it, but we're asking for 1 year before you pitch it to somebody else. And we also want, like I said, original content. So we're going to be we want to be the first publication to publish it.
Curating a couple of questions from the chat. One person says, I may have misunderstood, but if we're pitching 6 months in advance and we be preparing for an article about dealing with COVID, for example, at Christmas, how would we pitch an article when we don't know what's going on a few months from now?
Yeah, so the 6 months advance ones would be more related to the published themes that we've already been putting out on our website. There are going to be stories that we have to come up with on the fly. And the COVID-19 community comes together story that we did was that. I mean, we had to completely throw everything out that we were planning and come up with something in like 2 or 3 weeks. So that was tough. So there are always going to be those breaking news themed stories that we have to write at the very last minute. In fact, I was just emailed by the Ghost Guild and they said, hey, do you want to come on a paranormal investigation? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. And so I went, and now I have to put a story in the September, October issue. Like there's no other issue that's the perfect issue for it. So I'm now going to be writing that in the next week or two myself because I wanted to do it. But if a writer had come to me and said, hey, the Ghost Guild asked me to do this, do you want me to do it? I would do the same thing. I'd say, sure, you're going to have to write it really quickly. Can you do it? And we have some great writers, and they're usually willing to turn that around quickly for us. Usually I'll give them a month to write it. In that case, it might be like 2 weeks, and I've had writers do something in a week or 10 days and they just they just get it done. And so I really appreciate anybody who can do that. So there are going to be those kinds of assignments. So if you're pitching something and you are that writer who is willing to take something and do it quickly, just mention that to me. Let me know, because I do keep a spreadsheet with writers' information, and I put little notes like that in there next to the writer's name, like is willing to write a story in 10 days or less, or whatever. That's great for me to know that I can call on you in that situation.
And do you have an article length that you tend to go for?
Yeah, it varies. I would say for our features, we want it to be 1,000 to 1,200 words. Sometimes longer if it's going to be like our city guide is a little bit longer. If it's a department story, it's usually going to be 800 to 1,000. And we do have some that are just one pagers or maybe two pagers, but lots of pictures, and those are about 600 words. So it ranges from 600 to about 1,200 usually for the most part.
Would
And
you
then
consider, oh, go ahead,
I
I'm
was just
sorry.
gonna say, if you send more than that, as long as it's not too much more than that, it's not a problem. If I ask for 1,200 words and I get 2,000, that's gonna be a problem because that's gonna take me a long time to go through and figure out what I have to cut. So if you're gonna do that, just give me a heads up and say, okay, this is 800 words longer. I've sectioned it out as a sidebar that you can use. If you don't want to use it, just chop the sidebar. Like that's a great way to do that because then
Okay,
you're giving me way more than I'm paying for. So I'm going to be grateful for that. And if I can use it, I will, you know?
sure. You had said something that made me want to ask you a question about it, and I have lost the question, so I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'll come back to you. I'm sure. But
The
I wanted to say something too while you're trying to think, you know, one of the things that I think some editors maybe get stuck with or stuck on is that, and I don't know if this is true of other editors you all have worked with, but I sometimes, when I was a freelance writer, I would get the impression that the editor I was working with just felt like they were better, smarter, you know, than me. And I am completely intimidated by a lot of the really smart writers who query me and who send me ideas. And I know that that most of the writers who are working for Midtown and Cary Living are extremely intelligent, insightful individuals. And so I never try to take that. It's just an arrogance, I think, that I've noticed with some editors. And I don't try to be like that. I am not like that at all. And I feel like if I ever came across that way, please tell me because I hated that about some of the editors I used to work with. I try to be open to all ideas and not, you know, trying to appear that I'm smarter or that kind of thing. And I just think some editors and publishers can be like that, and I think that's a real turnoff. And you lose really good writers that way. So just wanted to throw that out there because I don't know how many editors you all have worked with, but when I came across a few of them like that, I was just thinking to myself, I am not going to be like that. I can't be like that because it's just so arrogant, you know, but it's just a random thought I wanted to throw in there somewhere today. So there it is.
Well, it actually flows into another question I was going to ask you, which is, you know, we're all trying to write for stable magazines that create good working relationships with their freelancers. So what would you suggest that freelancers look for in editors, having been on both sides of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. Just you don't want a know-it-all editor. You don't want somebody who's going to micromanage everything you write. If you're giving me a specific idea, there should be no micromanaging involved because I'm not going to accept the story unless it's an idea that I think is going to work for the magazine. So I think some editors will try to edit the heck out of something and it ends up becoming something completely different than what the writer intended. Now that said, I do, if I need to edit something and rework it, I will do that and not necessarily ask you because I just don't have time. But I also want to hear from you if you don't like the changes or if you think I did something I shouldn't have done. And of course, sometimes it's going to be after it's already published. Sorry about that. That's kind of how that works sometimes just because it's such a fast-paced business. But I do want to know for future relationship issues that we might run into. And so I try to honor the flavor and the meaning of the story without changing it too much. But sometimes I do have to cut it for space, or I might just see a different way to write it or change the intro. But I try not to do that. So I think when you're looking for an editor, you just hopefully look for somebody who wants to publish what you want to share and not change it so that it's not your work anymore, you know, and who's not going to say, okay, here are the bullets and I want you to write about each of these things. You know, if I give you a topic, then I really want to see what you're going to come up with and your style come through, not what I'm envisioning. And I've just received some wonderful stories that way that, you know, Mick, I don't know if you all have read any of Mick Schulte's work. She does some writing and photography for us. And she came up with this beautiful story idea of the murals in Raleigh and taking a bike tour through all the murals of Raleigh. And I was like, oh my
I
God,
love that.
perfect story for fall. So she also takes her own pictures. That's another thing that I love. If you are a decent photographer and you want to share some pictures, that's great. We do have quite a few photographers that we can send out for an assignment, and they're professionals. But if you consider yourself to be pretty good at it and you have a nice camera and you want to share a few pictures for your story, that's great. I'm open to that. So
That was actually a question I had, which was, that was the one I had forgotten that I now remember, which is, do you select stories in part for their photographability sometimes? Like if you have one that's going to be really pretty or...
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that's new for me at Midtown and Cary Living that I didn't have the pleasure of at Carolina Parent, because we were always so tight on space, and just had so much copy coming in that we just really couldn't do photo essays or photo driven stories. And we can now with Midtown. At Carolina Parent, I might have 3 or 4 pages for a feature. At Midtown, I've got 6 or 8. So that means that the photos can be great and beautiful. And so we do really like stories that will lend themselves to beautiful photography. And, you know, it's always nice to get that really one great shot that you can make like a full page and put your title on and then start the story after that. Because I think you all probably would feel the same way that I do about looking at a magazine, where you're really going to be drawn into it if there are beautiful, large, beautiful photos with the stories. So definitely stories that have an ability for a beautiful photo to introduce it, along with some throughout. Like I would love to have features that have at least 2 full-page photos in them somehow, if we can. And our fashion shoot that we're getting ready to do on Tuesday is going to be like that. It's going to have very minimal writing, because it'll basically just be like, here's the theme, and then we'll have descriptions of the outfits, basically. So that's not really going to be much of a, I mean, I didn't even assign a writer to that, because we'll probably come up with that on our own. But the mural, the bike tour through the Raleigh murals, that was a perfect story for like what you're describing, where you have mostly photos, and she wrote a nice story about it too. So I think it's going to be a really special one in our next issue that people will
That
like.
sounds great. I can't wait to read that.
Yeah. And she went with me to the Ghost Guild too and took some pictures. So we'll see how those turn out. It's going to be interesting. They're mostly in the dark, but that's the whole point, right? So
yeah,
to have that ghostly activity, which we really didn't have a lot. We had a few weird noises, but I wasn't spooked. I never ran away. I stayed for most of the time. So it was interesting.
I have pretty much wrapped up my questions. I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to open it up so that other people get a chance to ask questions that they have. So
let me start. Beth, I was curious if you would allow your contributors to review a galley if an article was especially detailed or complicated before you went to press.
If we have it done in time, I have no problem sending a PDF of what it looks like, what the design, you know, the designer is going to probably spend a lot of time on the stories that have lots of really big, beautiful photos in them. But if I'm concerned that something is going to be portrayed inaccurately, or that the writer's going to have a problem with how we've done something, I definitely would want you to see that before it published. So it maybe not every time, but if it's really important, yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Thank you.
And also we can give you PDFs afterwards of it, you know, for your own collection.
Excellent. That'd be great for our files.
Right.
Does anyone else have any questions for Beth while we have her this evening?
I ran my mouth so much, probably.
No, you gave us everything that we need to know. On behalf of everyone in TAF, Beth, and especially Liz, thank you so much for doing such an awesome job with us this evening. I want to thank you from our hearts for joining us this evening. You've got a wonderful magazine. A number of our members are writing and have written for you. And hopefully you'll get a ton of really wonderful ideas as a result of your conversation this evening.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And I do recognize a lot of names, and I really am honored to be in your all's presence and really appreciate everything those of you who have written for me over the years have done, and that you've stuck with me. And I didn't know what I was going to do after Carolina Parent. I kind of went through a crisis, and I was like, I don't know if I want to stay at the magazine industry. And then this job opened up, and here I am. So I'm with it for a few more years, and really love this area and love representing it, and really appreciate working with people who feel the same way. So thank you.
Can we get your email address for those who might have ideas to pitch?
It's beth@midtownmag.com. beth@midtownmag.com.
You don't ask your contributors to write on spec, do you? This is a question from a member. Some magazines are doing that. Writer's Digest, oddly enough, is actually asking new contributors to do on spec, which surprised the heck out of me. I don't think this is something that you would do. If you like an idea, you would buy it.
Right.
But I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, I'm a planner, so I really like to know way ahead of time what I'm going to be putting in the next issue, and so I don't think I would do that. Maybe, I mean, I'm not going to close the door to it, but
I'm not a fan of spec work anyway.
Yeah, no, we don't say that things have to be a certain way, and we've got some first-person stories, some third-person stories. I'm willing to make changes from how we normally do things, but I definitely like to have things planned if possible, and know ahead of time what's going to be in there. So I probably would not go that way.
That's wonderful. Before we move on, anybody else? One last call for questions for Beth. Anybody? All right, Beth, if you would like to hang with us for a few more minutes, we would love to have you join us. This is the part of our monthly meetings where we ask everybody to share the good news, whatever good news they might have, sales, markets, whatever they have. Does anyone have anything good to share? I'll start by telling you that where did I get an assignment from? I just finished an article for Back Issue Magazine, which is a comic book related magazine. I will be paid very, very little money for it, but I am having an awesome time working on this particular article. And I've come to realize I do my absolute best writing for the markets that pay me the least amount of money. So, but I'm happy to get it. And I did get another great assignment from Military Officer Magazine. So I was very excited about that. Is there anyone else who has anything to share? Drew.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think I mentioned to you that I did a anthology. I've been working on an anthology, and it came out, it's actually just a PDF and an ebook, but Scott Mason with Tar Heel Traveler did an interview with me because he was interested enough in it. So that was kind of cool. I think I'll go ahead and put the link in there for anybody that wants to go look at the interview. So that was a lot of fun.
Please do. And congratulations on that, Drew. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, just kind of reminder really that coming up in August on the 22nd, Poets Connection, we're doing a, through Living Poetry. We have Justine Kwame coming from Washington, D.C. to do a workshop with us. And it's pretty exciting. She is fantastic. I attended one of her workshops a couple of months ago, and I just really was enthused by her enthusiasm. And I like how she works with all age groups. So I think that's kind of a nice mix so that she's not specialized in one area.
Oh, that's fantastic. You're
free.
really moving with the poetry stuff, Lisa.
It's taken off in leaps and bounds. I'm pretty happy.
I also wanted to let everybody know that we're contemplating a final 2020 TAF talk. I've got someone very, very special in mind, but I want to find out if that individual is amenable before I make an announcement. But hopefully I'll have some good news to share very soon. And we're looking at that probably in either October or November. And then moving into the next year, we're hoping to do a TAF talk each quarter, alternating fiction and nonfiction writers. So that's our game plan right now. So anyone else have anything else to share right now? All right, I guess not then. Guys, this was awesome. It's great to see everybody. Oh, Nancy is promoting the anthology. If you have not bought TAF Stays Home, it's dirt cheap and an awesome collection. What's that?
After I get the Writer's Digest 50 books read, this will be my 51st. I will read it, but I
I've
can't
read
do
it,
right
and there's
now.
some wonderful, wonderful stuff
I'm
in
sure.
this book. I
I'm
was
sure.
so honored to be a participant in it. And I want to thank everybody who was part of this, and always Arlene Bice for doing the heavy lifting on that project. Couldn't have done it without her. So, all right, I guess we're good to go then this evening. It's great to see everybody. I hope everybody stays safe, stay healthy, and we will meet again in August. I'll see you all then. Take care. And Liz, thank you again.
Liz.
And Beth, thank you again for joining us this evening. Really
Thank you
appreciate
for having
it.
me. I really
Yes.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
You all have a great evening.
Good night.